If you're in the market for a preloaded subwoofer enclosure, you're going to want to take a look at this. That's because this new loaded subwoofer enclosure from AudioControl has some unique features, some of which you would never notice with a quick glance. But these features set this enclosure apart from many others on the market. And if you are looking for deep, hard-hitting bass at a solid value, this enclosure becomes even more appealing. So what are those unique features? What are the specs on these? What options are there? And how do they actually sound? In this video, we're going to find out. Hey everyone, I'm Mark. Welcome to CarAudioFabrication. Here on this channel, together we learn how to master car audio and how to design, build, and install our dream car audio system. A special thanks to AudioControl for sponsoring this video so that we can take a closer look. All right, so to kick this off properly, we have to do an unboxing, and I do want to mention up front that this is the EpicX V12, but this actually comes in two other options currently. You can also get the 8-inch model or the 10-inch model, as there are different EpicX size subwoofers. So 8, 10, and 12-inch currently available. Whoosh. Let's see if we can flip this over and take the box off. So plenty of good, dense packaging material, keeping your enclosure nice and safe en route to you. Inside the packaging, they give us the Epic AudioControl window sticker and the user guide. And then, of course, the enclosure itself. Now you may have noticed that I had one sitting in the background. I actually have two of these right now. More on this in a little bit. Like I mentioned earlier, the EpicX loaded enclosures currently come as an 8-inch, 10-inch, or 12-inch model, and the suggested pairing amplifier is an Epic 500 for each. The subwoofer in these enclosures is wired to 1 ohm, which you can see indicated here on the terminal, which makes it a perfect pair for the Epic 500 since this can be ran at 1 ohm. And don't forget, if you are looking for even more of an exciting bass experience, you can easily add the Epicenter to the Epic series of amplifiers, as these include the Epicenter link cable, which allows you to use this port on the side of the amplifier to easily power the Epicenter. Now, if you didn't notice already, this is not a sealed enclosure, but rather it is vented. You can see the port right here. The 8-inch model is tuned to 38 Hertz, the 10-inch model tuned to 33 Hertz, and this, the 12-inch model, is tuned to 31 Hertz. Now, taking some quick dimensions on this, the 12-inch model is about 16 3/8 of an inch wide. It's also about the same height, 16 3/8. And you'll notice this enclosure is a unique shape with the top at a slight angle, and then both the front and back faces also at an angle, but the larger depth dimension here is about 18 3/8 of an inch. So this enclosure is quite compact. Keep in mind this is the 12-inch version, and right now we are in the back of a GTI hatch, that's right, a Volkswagen Golf, which arguably has one of the smallest hatch areas, and you can see that we fit with room to spare, and if this was the 10-inch or 8-inch model, we would have even more room. It even fits nicely below the package tray. Next up here, I want to take a closer look at this carpeted finish. Obviously, it has this black carpet that's going to match well with existing vehicle interiors. But on these pre-made enclosures, I like to take a closer look at the fine details. They've done a good job blending the seams for wrapping the carpet around on these different panels, and they've also done a good job of wrapping the carpet around to the inside of the port. That way we don't see the actual edge of it. If we turn the enclosure around, they've also used a technique that we frequently talk about on the channel, where you add a rabbited step onto one of your panels, and this gives you a nice transition groove to wrap the carpet into and tuck it into. It gives it a nice clean look rather than just doing like an X or something to blend everything together. Now, there is another unique upholstery detail that I want to come back to in a minute here. There's more here than what meets the eye. We'll talk about that in a second. First, I want to show you guys this blank panel right here. You might be wondering, what is that for? Well, this is for the adaptive terminal cup. Let's say that for my installation, it makes more sense for the terminal cup to be on this side of the enclosure. What I can do is use an Allen key and remove these 4 screws. I can pop this out. Now this plate is actually metal, so it's good and solid. Now on the opposite side of the enclosure here, I'm obviously going to remove the terminal cup, and I like that they've used the same exact screws on both sides. That way I don't need to switch to a screwdriver or anything like that. So we will pull this out. We will detach the wiring because it's going to need to go over to the other side of the enclosure. And while we're still on this side that had the wiring terminal, we will install the adaptive terminal plate. So now we can flip this over again and install the terminal cup on this side, but you may be wondering, how can I get at that wire now that I've dropped it into the box? I could use some kind of tool to try to fish it out, but I'm going to show you guys in just a second why it's not a big deal to have to take the subwoofer out of this enclosure. Before we do that though, let's just secure this in place really quick. Good to go. So let's flip our subwoofer up now. Now, usually on these preloaded enclosures, I try to avoid removing the subwoofer if possible, and that's because most of the time they just use normal wood screws in order to secure the subwoofer into the enclosure. And in my opinion, you can only take a wood screw in and out so many times before it starts to kind of have a loose hold on the subwoofer. So let's use a different Allen key and take out these bolts, and we'll see why it's a little bit different in the case of the EpicX series loaded enclosures. This is the difference right here. They've used machine screws. And when we pull the subwoofer out, and our wiring's already disconnected because we disconnected it from the terminal earlier, the reason they were able to use machine screws is because they've added these threaded T-nuts on the inside of the enclosure. So you can loosen these machine screws and remove them and remove the subwoofer many times without any concerns over the quality of that hold. With the subwoofer removed, we can now check out some of the internal details on this enclosure. And first off, check this out. They've got the double layered baffle. You love to see it. A good strong baffle is key for a quality subwoofer enclosure. Additionally, on the inside here, they have some cross bracing that goes from side to side. And it's a bit difficult to show on video, but this is the inside of the internal port wall, and they've actually added a port end brace, which is an additional piece of material. That way the end of the port is good and strong. And again, it's difficult to show on video, but I can feel around to the inside of the port here, and they round over that inside of the port edge and also the round over of the port end brace, which is going to allow for that airflow back and forth over the end of the port to be nice and efficient. We're going to talk more about the subwoofer in a second here, but check this out. They've also applied foam to the wiring. The reason you do this is you don't want to hear the wiring potentially vibrating against the inside of the enclosure. The insulation on the wires is much harder and can cause a vibration noise, but if you have this foam applied, it's no longer of concern. Love to see that added detail. Now, earlier I mentioned that there's more here than meets the eye when it comes to this panel. Obviously, in its stock form right now, they have this gray kind of micro suede type material going on. It has a nice appealing look. Personally, I think it's a nice choice of accent material that would match with a lot of vehicles, but what if we want to do something a little bit more custom and make it match on our own? What's cool is once the subwoofer is removed, we can actually pop this panel off. And you can see that the back side of this panel is unfinished, and if we flip it over like this, it still fits in its existing spot. So we can custom upholster this on our own. Let's do that right now. Now the sky's the limit here, lots of different options for what we could do, but let's say I want to go with this pretty radical red carbon fiber looking upholstery vinyl. To get the best results, I recommend using a true upholstery adhesive, but honestly, for this small of a piece, you could probably get away with just using some of that spray contact cement. Now keep in mind the way that upholstery adhesive works along with contact cement is you need to apply it to both surfaces and then you're going to allow it to dry. Once tacky, you can then apply the two pieces together and it's going to cement its hold. From here, I can simply trim out the outside edges and then make the small holes for the bolts to pass through. To cut those holes, you could just make a small X with the same knife, but in this case, I'm using a leather punch in order to make a nice, perfectly round hole. And check it out, my friends, this was super easy to do and to make, and now we have a nice custom accent that we can add to the enclosure. I cannot wait to see how this is going to look once the subwoofer is installed. But speaking of the subwoofer, let's take a look at it because don't forget that the EpicX 12, 10, and 8 are also sold separately. So if you want to make your own custom enclosure using these, you can do so. The EpicX subwoofers that come in the preloaded enclosures are only available in this dual 2 ohm configuration, which allows them to wire this from the factory in parallel to present a 1 1 ohm load at the amp. But it is worth noting that if you are designing your own system, you can also get the EpicX subwoofers as a dual 4 ohm. So lots of different options for system design. In fact, let's get the 10 and the 8 out of the box so that you guys can see them in all their glory as well. Now the motor design on these is designed for efficiency and output. So tons of solid bass, making use of every bit of that amplifier power. The surround material on this is a composite foam. These have a rigid steel basket in order to eliminate resonance, and a high temperature lightweight voice coil that allows for dynamic bass response. The one-piece dust cap style design helps the cone below to be much more rigid. And speaking of that cone design, it's a non-pressed paper cone. If you look closely in there, you'll see that the tinsel leads are stitched to the spider. Plenty of cooling design here around the voice coil. And finally, the subwoofer terminals here are of the quick release variety, and there is plenty of room there for a large gauge wire. So let's get our subwoofer installed here, and don't forget that first I need to connect the speaker wiring. Make sure I orient the logo in the correct orientation, or switch it if I would like, and then I can reattach the bolts. A quick side note for you guys, when you're using bolts with T-nuts, which are mounted inside the enclosure, I always recommend starting the fastener by hand. You want to be absolutely sure that you're not cross-threading it. All right, last one here. We are good. So let's see how this looks here. Check that out. Wow. How cool is that we can easily, completely customize our enclosure to match our vehicle or our design aesthetic. And worth noting, don't forget that I could just take this off and switch it back to the stock version if I would like. And another option is I can take a flush trim bit on the router and I could use this bearing and actually copy the exact shape of this panel, which means I could make as many as I want and keep having all sorts of different customization options. But now the fun stuff. Let's take one of these, get it installed, and see how it sounds. All right, my friends, here we have it, the EpicX series loaded enclosure installed into the vehicle. Now let's do a quick sound test here. And first, I just want to see how deep this subwoofer can actually dig. Remember that you're listening to the sound on your device. So if your device cannot play bass frequencies, you're not going to hear the bass here. I'd recommend a good pair of headphones in order to see if we can actually hear this. But I want to see how deep this is going to play starting at 63 Hertz. So here's 63 Hertz, and keep in mind, I'm trying not to clip the microphone right now. It really wouldn't take much to do so though. Important to note that that bass frequency sounds really good here in person, but when clipping the microphone, obviously on your guys' end, it sounds a little bit different. 50 Hertz, 40 Hertz, 31, I can still hear it. How about you guys? And finally, 25 Hertz, I can still hear this one as well. So definitely easily digging nice and deep. Now let's listen to some royalty-free music. This is the track Chicago from the YouTube audio library. Next up, also from the YouTube audio library, I Did That. Impressive for being only a single 12, and again, only on 500 watts RMS. This sub is getting down. So plenty of bass for sure. Let's evaluate something a little bit more elegant. This is a bit more of a smooth rock song. This is Plenty Step. Now, like I said, one of these is substantial, more than enough bass. Honestly, I am quite impressed with the output, but let's have a little fun here. Let's do two. After doing a quick rewire, here we have the two EpicX series loaded enclosures ready to go. Let's try this out again with that Chicago track from the YouTube audio library. The EpicX enclosure is clearly engineered to prioritize massive acoustic output and sheer efficiency over what is sometimes considered a dry, sterile sound signature. AudioControl built this line to deliver hard-hitting low-end and maximum presence without demanding a premium price tag. When you evaluate it through the lens of cost to performance value, the output you get for the money makes it a highly energetic, budget-friendly option that bass lovers are definitely going to appreciate. To learn more about the EpicX series loaded vented enclosure from show sponsor AudioControl, be sure to check out the links down in the video description. Once again, a big thanks to them for sponsoring this video so that we can take a closer look, and thank you guys so much for tuning in and watching.